Hey real estate investors, I want to share with you one simple move you can make to save over 15% on your taxes while protecting yourself from lawsuits. Let's go ahead and dive right in. Today we're going to be talking about the S-corporation. It's a powerful tax saving measure that you can do as a real estate investor to be able to get yourself to the elite level of best practices used by over 2,000 investors all over the country. Hey, if you don't know me, my name is Scott Royal Smith. I'm the owner of Royal Legal Solutions. We're a one-stop shop law firm that serves clients in all 50 states. We have a staff of over 30 people, and we've been in business for over 6 years, and we're working with every type of real estate investor in every state and every asset class. So I want to tell you today about the S-corporation and how it can benefit you as a real estate investor. So some key features to go over. One is that an S-corporation can help protect your business from any business-related lawsuits. It's a time-tested type of protection that you're going to get both in the types of lawsuit protection as well as the tax treatment. It's very easy to understand and use. This is very common for CPAs that are skilled CPAs to be able to utilize this S-corporation tax strategy. And it's very effective if properly formed and most importantly, properly maintained. So when you look at S-corporations, there's a lot of things that people misunderstand about them. These common myths include that corporations are really hard to understand, or hey, I'm too small for it. It's overkill for what I need right now. Or some people tell me like, hey Scott, I don't have to worry about lawsuits because I'm honest. So I don't think that as an honest person that somebody could sue me. And that other people have told me like, hey, I think I can properly form and maintain these entities on my own. But let me tell you, after reviewing so many LLCs with so many clients, people generally can sometimes get it right on the setup, but always get it wrong on the maintenance when it comes to what kinds of protections they need. And another thing I've heard is that corporations like S-corporations or LLCs just aren't effective for protection. They'll say, hey, I just need insurance, and with insurance it's going to be enough. What they don't understand is insurance companies are profit-seeking corporations that aren't out there to serve the best interest. So you need a LLC, you need an S-corporation to give you the extra protections when the insurance companies won't protect you, when those big claims come through that they want to deny. So if you have an S-corporation, you get special benefits. Like you can start or run any business through an S-corporation. You can use it as the property management company or leasing real estate to be able to help protect your personal liability and operate as if you were a more sophisticated organization. You can save money on your taxes, specifically the self-employment tax. You can protect yourself from business-related lawsuits. So if anybody ever wants to sue you, that they only can sue the S-corporation. They're not going to be able to sue you personally. And guess what? If you're in an active business, that is going to happen. And also, that the top benefit of the S-corporation is because you're protecting yourself personally, you're protecting your credit score, which is important because that's your access to capital to be able to do deals. So you must protect yourself personally if you are in real estate. Now, the question in my mind next is the S-corporation right for you? And how would we know? So let's take a look at the bigger picture. This is what we call the Freedom Temple. And the Freedom Temple has a couple of key components here. This is the way that we're able to help people in a picture be able to just grasp the highest level map of how do you achieve financial freedom, reclaim your time, protect your assets, and build a legacy. And what you have to do with that is you have to create wealth. You have to protect that wealth from the government, right? By saving money on taxes. Then you need to protect yourself from lawsuits, and that's where the 5 pillars of asset protection come in around anonymity in the ownership of your assets, protecting yourself from liability, separating the assets from the active business operations, isolating every individual asset. So if there's a lawsuit against one asset, they can't go after the others. And very importantly, as part of this is insurance. We must have great insurance. Great insurance comes into play as our first line of defense, and that we use our asset protection structures when the insurance fails or when they deny coverage because it's a serious claim or a very large claim. Next, we look at how do we leverage time. This means streamlining our operations so that way we get time back. How do we protect our legacy to ensure that everything that we built is going to pass on to our children, our heirs, or what we care about after we're done using those assets. And lastly, when we're done with being able to establish all of our structure here, what we're going to be able to get is the foundation of our life, which is our personal fulfillment. So this is our highest level map of what it means a good life and be able to achieve financial freedom. Now, if you are thinking about, hey, do I need an S-corporation? Let's go over first, who doesn't need it? So if you don't have the income, you don't have any businesses, you have poor credit, and you don't want to improve your credit, don't spend money on S-corporation. It's not going to be something that's going to be able to help you. But if you're somebody out there who wants to save money on taxes, you want to protect yourself from lawsuits, you want to build business credits, that way your business can get credit separate from you so you have more access to capital, you're going to need an S-corporation. Or if you want to, if you have good credit and you want to protect it, then you're going to need an S-corporation or a corporate structure to help protect yourself from the lawsuits. So a couple of key tips when you're looking at how can I take advantage of S-corporations is, number one, you don't actually have to file an S-corporation. What you can do is file a simple LLC and do an S-corporation election at the end of the year to get all of the benefits and the tax benefits and the protections that you would otherwise get with an S-corporation, but with a much easier to manage structure just by using an LLC. The LLC is a lot easier to form and maintain than the S-corporation, and it's our preferred strategy at Royal Legal Solutions to use that as our operating company. And by operating company, we mean a company that doesn't own any assets but does all of our active business operations. It's that our face to the world, the entity that we want people to sue because that's the one that they interacted with and the only entity they legitimately can sue. And when we look here to the right side of this diagram, guys, we're going to look at a little bit here of what happens with the income. So in a traditional LLC, what would happen is that you get the money in from the traditional LLC. Let's say you have $100,000 that's made in the LLC. You then have that money would go directly to you. It would just get reported directly onto your personal tax return, and you pay your Social Security and Medicare and your income tax. Now, when you use an S-corporation or an LLC that's taxed as an S-corporation, what you're able to do is separate out W-2 income from dividend income. So in this case, your W-2 income is like that $40,000, say, salary, of which you're going to pay your Social Security and Medicare, and you're going to report that on your W-2. Now, the other $60,000 of income is dividend income, which has no Social Security or Medicare tax, and this is reported on a K-1, and it also, because this is dividend income, is not subject to self-employment tax. That's a 15.3% tax that you're able to avoid by going the route of taking all of that money out as dividend income. So instead of having to pay self-employment tax and Social Security and Medicare tax on everything, if you had it just with a traditional LLC or nothing at all, with using the S-corporation, you can take $60,000 of that income or more, and to be able to use that as dividend income and help and avoid having to pay tax on that amount. Now, as I said before, we use these LLCs and taxes as corporations as our operating companies. That's our face to the world, the one we want people to sue. It's the one that we do all of our businesses through. We send emails through it, sign contracts, sign leases as a landlord. All happens through that entity. So when we look at the S-corporation tax election, we see here that it's a tax strategy, and we look at our 5 pillars of asset protection. This is a liability. This is our liability protection happens through the S-corporation, and that when we use this S-corporation, we're using it as an operating company, and it has all of the protections of an LLC. It's going to save that 15.3% on the self-employment tax for the lion's share of the income that we have coming in. It's going to protect your good credit rating, because if there's a lawsuit that anybody wants to file against you, remember, you weren't a party to the lease. You weren't the one that sent the email. It was the S-corporation that signed the lease. It was the S-corporation that sent the email, and you're just an officer of that S-corporation, and then it gives you that protection because you're not the one that sent it. It's the organization that sent it. You just happen to be a member of that organization. And I know that might sound a little funny, but legally that's how it works, and these are time-tested strategies that, when properly formed and maintained, end up with those types of legal consequences, and this is why sophisticated investors and people use it. And then also, it's going to help you build business credit. So you'll have your personal credit, which is tied to your personal credit score, that you have all of the access to funds that you never otherwise normally would have, but your business itself will have a credit score, and then your business itself can then start establishing lines of credit, usually after 2 years of formation and ownership of that business. It's going to be able to get independent lines of credit. Great, so let's go ahead and look beyond the basics of the S-corporation. And here what we're going to look at is adding anonymity to the ownership of S-corporation. Many people don't want anybody else to know what assets they own or what companies they own, right? So here you can see where it's a tax strategy, and then we're layering in not just the liability protection, but also the anonymity protection. And what you do for that is that you use a law firm to create, and using a lawyer and an anonymous trust to form the LLC as taxes and S corporation, and you have that LLC owned by a trust, and all of the entities are formed by an attorney. So if anybody ever looks at who owns the LLC or S corporation, all they can see is it's owned by a trust, and they'll say, well, who formed these entities? And who are these entities related to? Everything ties back to an attorney and a law firm, and all of that information is further protected by the attorney-client privilege. So it allows you very high levels of anonymity from anybody ever looking to sue you. They're not going to be able to tie from the public records and know for sure that, hey, this person owns this entity, and which gives you a lot of flexibility of how do you want to represent yourself out there in the world. So this attorney-client privilege, the use of the nominee trustee as the attorney to be able to be the person on record associated with the trust and with the LLC allows you that screen. Now that doesn't mean absolute anonymity, right? When you go to a bank and you have to produce documentation to open a bank account, the bank will know, right? And if you file any taxes through the S corporation, the IRS will know. But those are private disclosures that aren't publicly available and aren't publicly searchable. So that's the type of anonymity we're talking about is the type of anonymity that is publicly searchable, that they look for when they're trying to determine whether you are a good person to go after and to go sue. Great. So this is the way that you're able to become an invisible type of entity, right? So you can stack the LLC, that taxes an S corporation, and it's owned by that anonymous trust. We call that an agent trust internally at Royal Legal Solutions. So you can see that the agent trust owns the entity, and that we would use this as a member managed entity in almost all circumstances. So that means that the trust is the sole member of the entity, and you are then a beneficiary of the trust, right? And so that's how you're entitled to all of the benefits of the entity through the trust. And the trust itself is a private document, so there's no disclosure of anything that people can find out about the trust. When they see that it's owned by a trust, it just says the name of the trust. So you can use this agent trust to be able to mask the ownership of any type of entity that you have, including any type of LLC or corporation, and that you would simply create a bank account and accounting here at the entity level. That way you can take in money through this entity and then otherwise disperse it any way that you want to. And because this is a single member type of LLC here, then that would also mean that it would get passed through tax treatment as a disregarded entity for tax purposes. Now, it allows you to be able to create separation. Separation is very important. When you look at separation, you're looking at being able to minimize your exposure by performing like these high-risk activities in a quote-unquote decoy company. We call it a decoy company because it doesn't have any assets. So if somebody sues that entity, your worst-case scenario is being able to wind down that entity and start up a new one. There's nothing wrong with being able to do this. It's the way the laws were created. It's what sophisticated people do. So you can see here that we have this operating company. That's this Shell LLC is another name for it, right? Or Shell LLC, taxes and S corporation. And then you see over here is where we'd have an asset holding company underneath its own agent trust and its own entity. So all the assets are held here on the right-hand side, and all of the operations go here on the left-hand side. So this entity would own everything, and this entity over here on the left-hand side would do everything. Now, this is how you're able to prevent lawsuits, to be able to hide your assets in conjunction with the operating company. So we talked about the S corporation, or the LLC taxes S corporation as the operating company. Now we're shifting gears to talk about what happens on the asset holding side of things. So that the entity that owns everything but doesn't do anything. And what you can see here is there's a couple of different models that you're able to do with that. This model that we're looking at here is what we typically refer to as a hub and spoke model for LLCs. So you can have one LLC that's owned by an agent trust that allows you to own the parent structure anonymously, and then it has individual LLCs underneath it, all with their own individual land trusts, and those individual land trusts then own the individual properties, and that way you're able to compartmentalize every asset and own it anonymously and have it all streamlined up through one parent LLC, so you end up with just one tax filing, one EIN number, one bank account, one set of accounting books. And this type of structure is infinitely scalable to be able to get as big as you want to. And because because you'll own all of the assets anonymously, because all of the assets are owned by land trust, and because you own all of the entities anonymously, because the entities themselves are owned by other types of anonymous trust or agent trust, nobody can find out what you own, and it looks like you'll qualify for food stamps on paper if anybody ever comes to sue you. Now, when it comes time for financing with the banks, you can produce them a documentation. It's a private disclosure, so we're not worried about that blowing our anonymity, and we can go ahead and proceed as business just as usual. So this type of structuring that you do will not inhibit your ability to get financing or otherwise operate your business, and it won't even complicate your business. Your taxes, your bookkeeping, and accounting should all stay almost essentially the same way it is right now and won't cost you anything extra to do it. Now, I want to give you guys even zooming out one more level to give you an even more complete picture of what this looks like. So here's what we just talked about was the asset holding company. You'll recognize this as an agent trust, oftentimes owned by a Wyoming LLC or a Texas LLC, and that there would be individual LLCs underneath it with each of their individual land trusts and assets. Each of these LLCs here are typically formed in the state of where the asset is located, and that's typically done for financing purposes. And because these LLCs are in turn owned by Wyoming LLC, we're not worried about any vulnerabilities in charging order protection from any of these individual LLCs. So we can form these LLCs in the state wherever the asset is located. That's going to make it the easiest in terms of yearly compliance. It's also going to make it the easiest for any of the financing institutions that you're going to be working with. And we can get that top tier type of protection by having this LLC owned by the Wyoming LLC. And because it's owned by the Wyoming LLC, then we're able to gather any charging order protection that's needed there. So if you have a question on charging order protection, search my YouTube channel, and I'll be able to explain more to you about that there. Now, if you look at the other side here, this is where we talked about the operating company. You'll see this is a traditional LLC. We talked about this traditional LLC being taxed as an S-corporation to help you save on self-employment tax, as well as some of the Social Security and Medicare taxes, that you can own that company through this anonymous trust, so that way you're able to own your operating company anonymously as well. Having this type of setup also lets you set up for having retirement accounts to help save additional money on taxes and have leveraged wealth with tax-free wealth building during until retirement. And this is another video that you can watch for us about how exactly does the operating company come into play with the self-directed IRAs and solo 401ks. And lastly, we look at the operating company and the asset holding company are all owned by the living trust, potentially an offshore trust. If you have over $3 million in total net worth, we like to use an offshore trust option as well, and it's all part of your estate plan. So everything in your life, and the entity structures at the very top, will all tie into your living trust as part of your estate plan, and then everything that you own and everything you operate will all be below the living trust. So all of your assets get held inside of the asset holding company, which is scalable to be as big as you need it to be, infinitely scalable, and all of your active business operations, for no matter how much you're doing, can all be run through a single operating company, as long as they're in the same line of business, so to speak. Great. So let's go ahead and talk about a little bit about the owner's manual of how to actually use this S-corporation. And we have some frequently asked questions when it comes to that. And one is, what is the benefit of electing the S-corporation status? Well, it helps you to save on taxes, both on the income tax and the self-employment tax. And because it's a pass-through nature for the S-corporation, it allows you to be able to have the same types of tax treatment that you have now, with just the added benefits of being able to save on those taxes. We find that it's typically around the $50,000 per year mark that we're at break even for the cost of having to prepare an extra tax return for the LLC or S corporation from the tax savings. So if you're making over $50,000 a year, it's going to make sense to be able to use this strategy. Other people like to know is like, hey, can I use my can I still contribute to my solo 401k? And if I have this S corporation, the answer is absolutely yes, you can. You're also going to be able to do all of your banking and accounting through the S corporation, and just to be able to hold a single bank account in your S corporation to be able to conduct those affairs. It typically costs as little as $950 to be able to set up these LLCs and have them taxed as an S corporation. That can vary from state to state. It can also vary if fees change over time from the states, but we see these formed for as little as $950 from very many of our clients. And a lot of people want to know, how long does it take? How long does it take for me to get something like this set up? And we can typically get people set up in as little as 2 weeks, especially if it's an urgent concern for you. But this can also depend upon government turnaround times, especially if there's backlogs and how fast they're able to process a lot of these entity formation documents. But it's a very streamlined process. We walk you through everything step by step, so that way you know exactly what you need to do, and you're paired with professionals throughout the process that you don't have to pay anything extra for, that will talk to you live to make sure that you know exactly what you need to do. So if this is something you want to learn more about or start implementing right now, the best thing to do is go to Royal Legal Solutions right now and take the quiz. It's royallegalsolutions.com/quiz. If you go to royallegalsolutions.com, you'll see it's get a price or take a quiz at the top of the page, and that'll be able to help you get to the page, which will have a number of questions on it, which tells us how we can start to have a meaningful conversation. Get to know how you're similar to the other 2,000 investors that we have helped that are just like you, to make sure that we're going to provide you meaningful information from the very beginning. So go to royallegalsolutions.com/quiz right now to take that quiz, so we can start that conversation and pairing you with the right information and the right action steps to help you save money on taxes and get yourself protected. Go to royallegalsolutions.com/quiz right now.